Hello, everyone. Forgive my appearance, but I am not here to look beautiful. I am here to share some thoughts about a video game. So, last night I finished Far Cry 4 for the first time. Last year, my introduction to the series was Far Cry 5 and New Dawn, and I had fun, so I wanted to check out more. I'm pretty sure Far Cry 3 is considered the best, but I went for 4 next. But I will say I was very disappointed with the ending of Far Cry 4, and I will explain why. Last night in bed, I wrote down some quick notes on my phone, so I'm just gonna kind of read through them and flesh them out a bit more. I didn't want to bother making a script for this, so it's just a casual video. And hopefully I won't trip over my words too much or make my point unclear. But before I get into my actual problem, first I just need to talk about the two main supporting characters, Amita and Sabal, and how they are introduced at the beginning. Because the choices in the game are mainly between siding with either Amita or Sabal. They are both leaders of the Golden Path. They both have the same goal of liberating Kyrat from pagan men, but they have different perspectives on how they want to go about it and how they want the country to be once it is free. Sabal represents tradition and religion, and Amita represents more progressive, modernizing desire for the country. And by the end, neither are supposed to be perfect-looking characters. The choices are meant to be hard, I would assume. The interesting thing for me was I actually didn't feel like the choices were hard for me, personally. And that's probably a perspective that a lot of people who've played the game have, but I just found it interesting that right off the bat, I didn't like Sabal. He just, the way he talked, it almost felt villainous to me. And the way he spoke was just so grand that it didn't appeal to me. The way Amita was much more personable, if that's the right word. So, like, with the first decision, it's like, are we gonna go save these soldiers, or are we going to sacrifice them so we have intel on what the Royal Army's next move is gonna be? And Sabal would never let the soldiers die just for intel we might not need. And it's interesting because I usually love to choose the more objectively good, morally good choices in games. I like being a good character in games. But immediately from mission 1 and then all throughout the rest, I always sided with Amita. Amita wasn't always making pretty choices. Obviously, she wanted to sacrifice soldiers for the intel, but they were choices that she was making with a clear plan to better Kyrat. Like, clearly they couldn't win the war based on manpower alone, so having that intel could give them a good upper hand in the war and help them out. It wasn't just some careless choice to let people die. Obviously her ideas escalate more past that, where Sabal gets really mad at her that she wants to keep the opium fields. He thinks she wants to be a drug lord and ruin the country. And do I think that down the road drug farming could become dangerous for the country? Sure, yes, but Amita isn't, as I wrote down here, Amita isn't trying to become a drug lord like everyone says. She just sees that as the most realistic way the country can actually thrive once it's free, as they have little other resources. She's planning ahead for the future because she doesn't want to just save Kyrat for the moment. She wants to save it forever, so they're gonna need income, and blowing up all the stuff that they can use to make money instead of capturing it isn't necessarily the smartest choice. And then I just felt like Sabal kind of devolved into this annoying, pretentious misogynist. Obviously, his view of Badra as the Tarun Matara, and just the way he talks about Amita and calls her a bitch and stuff. It's just, ugh. I don't like that. And I promise this is getting somewhere. Just following that thread of I always sided with Amita, that is leading somewhere, which is my problem with the ending. But to keep going on this subject here for a minute, I also found it so much easier to choose Amita over Sabal because both of them just saw AJ. I'm gonna call him AJ because he calls himself AJ. I know a lot of the characters say Ajay. They say that's the right way to say it, but he says AJ, so I'm going with AJ. Both saw AJ as just like a tool for their goals. They wanted to save Kirat, and here comes this guy who can help them save Kirat. And they want to use him for that. But I felt like Amita treated him like a person beneath all of that, while Sabal seemed to treat AJ more as an object, a symbol for the revolution, just someone to be molded into his father, molded into like a second coming of his father instead of acting as his own person. He just wanted Mohan Gale 2.0. Like, to him, AJ wasn't just some guy, he was this great being, this symbol of resistance and tradition, when he doesn't really see himself that way. I mean, there's not a ton to AJ as a character because he doesn't talk a lot, but I mean, he's just there to scatter his mother's ashes. He's not there to become some god for the golden path. And I think Amita just sees him, as a super soldier, but he's still a man beneath all that. So I found it easy to side with Amita, even when sometimes her choices were made to look like the bad ones, as I wrote. Because overall, it's like the game, the people who, the game kind of wants to give you this perspective that the drugs are the focus for her, when that isn't true. Like, I felt like there was definitely a significant thread in there of her wanting the women to be free to be more than wives, and for girls like Badra to not be forced into becoming the Tarun Matara and forced to live the rest of their lives as a religious symbol when they might not want to. I mean, you do have the conversation with Badra where she's like, I don't know what to choose. And I feel like if you don't know what to choose in that kind of situation, then you probably don't really want to say yes to being seen as the living personification of a goddess. So I didn't really feel like Badra wanted that, so Amita's side is good for that. And I also think it's interesting, I felt like even the radio host in the game, he preferred Amita too, so it was interesting. It seemed slightly biased in that way. I mean, because, like, obviously Robbie Ray Vrana is fine with doing drugs and Sabal isn't. But he talks about how, like, oh, Amita's cool and Amita wants to build hospitals and schools and stuff. And when he talks about Sabal, he's like, oh, Sabal wants religion to take over, and he's just gonna enslave people, which is definitely a leap in logic from how we see Sabal throughout most of the game. But I just thought that was interesting, just why I felt it so easy to side with Amita. But then the very end comes around. After you deal with Pagan Min, and you can go back to that one town, and you see how Amita is now acting as a leader, without Sabal getting in the way. They just make her cartoonishly evil. in a way that doesn't work the same way that I think it works when they try to show how, like, Sabal's way wasn't perfect either. I feel like they just really dialed it up with Amita to this ridiculous level because, you know, they're trying to do a no side is right kind of thing here. So first, I will say, if you had sided with Sabal at the end, then you see him acting as leader. You see him killing the people who sided with Amita, which is very extreme because they were ultimately all on the same side of the war. And he even, like, slits their throat right in front of Badra, this child. That's not gonna traumatize her or anything. While he's just going on about purifying the country and religious stuff. And obviously that is a lot more intense than how we see him in the story leading up to that. But I felt like you could see that he was, like, getting more extreme to that point. On the flip side, if Amita's left in charge and you see how she's handling Kirat post Pagan Min, you see her capturing and enslaving civilians to force them into labor to rebuild Kirat, which does fit into how we've seen so far, how she's, you know, she'll do whatever it takes to build Kirat up, and that has gone now from just growing opium to slavery, which is, again, a big leap. But it's not only that. She also heavily implies that she killed Badra, the child, so that no one could use her as a symbol to refuel a religious uprising against Amita's command. Like, you know, like Sabal wanted to use Badra as an inspiring symbol for the people. So I guess in this version, Amita says, no inspiration, I'm gonna kill her. Like, just in a extremely anti-religion way, I guess. But it doesn't make any sense when clearly she cared so much before about saving Badra from a very stifling fate as the Tarun Matara, forced to potentially be a child bride and just to have no choice in what she wants out of life. You know, at the very beginning, they make it seem like Amita is this caretaker for Badra. She really cares about her best interests. And then she just kills her. It's just hard to believe. And I that's just what I didn't like about the game, is that I could kind of understand if you had sided with Sabal, that escalation from we always have to make the choice that's best for the tradition and religion of Kirat into you didn't side with me, so now you're gonna die in the name of Kira kind of thing. That made sense. But Amita going from we need to be a progressive country from now on, and we're gonna do the things that maybe aren't pretty, but they're gonna help us out, so we can actually have money to build infrastructure and stuff like that, into I killed a child. That just, it really threw me off, and it just made the ending feel so sour. And it's not sour because the ending was bad, because, like, the ending to Far Cry 5 is pretty bad, but that one was, like, impactful in a really exciting and satisfying way. So, continuing to read off my notes here, I'm not always a big fan of the all sides are bad type of story. Sometimes it's done well, and sometimes it makes me want to scream. I feel like Ghost Recon Wildlands kind of did that, and it was not good. That's the first game I think of. And I do think it could have worked really well in Far Cry 4, because Kirat is an isolated country that could be doomed to be stuck in the past or stuck in civil war forever and never Sure, the only people who want to rise up and lead the country are either ruthless or destructive. You know, they're either egomaniacs like Pagan Min or extremists like Amita and Sabal. You know, they're just gonna get in an endless cycle of that. But I don't think that the all sides are bad thing works, particularly because they had to twist one side so badly that they just ruined what a character originally stood for. With Amita. Unless I'm supposed to believe that Amita was just lying the whole time about caring for people and caring for Badra. Am I really supposed to believe that she just wants to be a drug lord ordering people around and killing children? Because I don't think so. I didn't get that energy from her, but I do get the energy from Sabal that if he really doesn't like you and he really thinks you're doing something against Kirat's traditional values, yeah, he might want to off you. He has bad vibes to me. And I guess they kind of had to make Amita into something she wasn't, because they couldn't play the angle that just making the main export drugs was too far for AJ, because clearly he's fine being injected with random substances by Yogi and Reggie consistently. I don't know why he keeps going back to get drugged by them, even though the first time he met them, they tried to kill him. That's another reason you can not side with Sabal, because Sabal is so, like, purity, drugs are bad. Which, like, yes, drugs are bad, but, am I supposed to believe AJ is just gonna listen to that argument when he's out here tripping out of his mind every other day? And, they also couldn't make her worse just from a, like, I'm not saying she's an atheist, but she doesn't, the traditional religion of Kirat is clearly too extreme for her liking. They couldn't make it a question of religion when AJ wasn't raised in Kirat and has no real ties to the religion and culture there. So that's not really a reason to make Amita look so much, or not so much worse, but just as bad as Sabal, without the whole child murder thing. And it's the same with Sabal constantly trying to get AJ to side with him by saying, like, this is what Mohan would have done. It's what Mohan stood for. Mohan wouldn't do all this stuff Amita wants to do. Because AJ didn't know his dad. I don't think the instinct to make him proud can be, like, particularly present in that case. And obviously that would vary from person to person, but I just didn't see that there would be enough personal connection for AJ to really care about Sabal wanting him to follow in Mohan's footsteps so badly. And also, like, Mohan wasn't even a good person. Really? he killed his wife's illegitimate child. So he's a child murderer. If we're supposed to think Amita is bad for being a child murderer, which yes, it's bad, then we must also think Mohan is bad. So AJ should not want to be like his father, and therefore he should not listen to Sabal, because Sabal is just the ultimate #1 Mohan Gale fanboy, and that's all he wants AJ to be. So they just clearly they had no option other than to make up something else that would make Amita horrible, to make the ending equally miserable on both sides. And the fact that they just immediately jumped to slavery and child murder is very, very intense. In a way that does not work for me. Like, what do you mean this woman who was so disgusted by this patriarchal culture now wants to strip away people's liberties herself? It didn't work for me. But because I didn't actually find the actual antagonists particularly interesting in this game compared to Far Cry 5, I guess it is a good thing that they made the two supporting characters interestingly antagonistic. I just think they took it too far with Amita, clearly. They didn't set it up properly. They could have set it up in a way that worked, but instead she just seemed, you know, not perfect, but agreeable enough, and then they had to go fully mask off. She's actually this totally different evil person. It didn't work for me. And when I say I don't like the villains, I mean, I know a lot of people like Pagan Min. Yeah, he's like charismatic and flamboyant, but honestly, he's barely in the game. Seriously, he's barely in the game. And so are the others, and I hated Yuma because her section in the prison, there was this weird camera movement and made me nauseous, so I just absolutely loathed that woman for making me go through that. That is just my rambly complaint here about Far Cry 4's ending. It was like this total, not like a total, I mean, yeah, it was kind of a total 180 on how they had portrayed Amita so far. That she really cared about Badra, and she wanted to change the country to help kids and, you know, girls like Badra into, oh, by the way, don't go looking for Badra, she's never gonna come back, 'cause I killed her. So that was my video game rant for tonight. Low quality video that like 2 people will care about, but thank you for watching or listening. And it'll be interesting because, you know, my whole perspective on this might change in the future. Sometimes I really have strong feelings about something, so strong enough to want to, you know, put it in a video, and then a couple years later I'm thinking, why did I care so much about that? I don't really feel the same way now. It's just interesting to not just have these thoughts now, but wonder, will I not have them in the future? I don't know. I just feel like it's a character inconsistency in a really bad way. So if anyone has a different perspective, feel free to let me know. I might get brave enough to look at the comments. I just enjoy getting my thoughts out about things, and YouTube is a good place for that, so here I am, world. Peace out, everyone. Thank you for humoring my video game thoughts.